The little puppy sat in the farthest corner of the shelter, curled up on a thin blanket that barely covered the cold, hard floor. His fur was a mix of brown and white, but it was unkempt, matted, and tangled from weeks, maybe months, of being on the streets. What made him truly different, though, was his face. Unlike the other dogs, whose floppy ears and bright eyes begged for attention, this puppy had a strangely human-like expression. His large, round eyes seemed too full of understanding. His furrowed brow gave him a look of constant curiosity, and the slight tilt of his head made it seem like he was always trying to understand the world around him. Some visitors of the shelter found it amusing. Others found it unsettling. The shelter staff had named him Buddy. Despite his unique face, he was one of the quietest dogs in the building. He didn't bark when visitors came in. He didn't jump excitedly against the kennel door like the others. He simply watched, his deep brown eyes following every person that walked past his cage. Most visitors wanted playful, energetic puppies. Families came looking for dogs that would fetch balls, chase their kids around the yard, and wag their tails with endless excitement. Buddy, with his odd, almost human stare, was always ignored. One afternoon, a young couple stopped in front of Buddy's cage. The woman crouched down, tilting her head at the little dog. "Look at his face," she whispered to her husband. "He looks so different." Her husband chuckled. "Yeah, it's kind of weird, isn't it? Almost like he's trying to figure us out." Buddy stared back at them, blinking slowly. The couple hesitated for a moment, then moved on to the next cage. Days passed, then weeks. One by one, the other dogs found homes. Families left the shelter with wagging tails and happy barks following them. But Buddy remained. The shelter's director, an older woman named Margaret, sighed as she looked at his file. He had been here too long. They were running out of space, and hard decisions had to be made. "We have to add him to the list," she told the staff quietly one morning. No one responded right away. A few glanced toward Buddy's cage. He was still there, still watching, still waiting. "We'll give him a few more days," Margaret added, guilt in her voice. "But if no one comes for him..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Buddy blinked, his strange little face unreadable, as if he knew what was coming. Buddy didn't understand why fewer and fewer dogs were around him. One by one, his noisy neighbors had disappeared, their cages emptied and cleaned, replaced by new arrivals. Yet he remained, always watching, always waiting. The shelter workers tried not to think about it. They had seen this before. Some dogs were simply overlooked for too long. People wanted puppies with fluffy ears and bright, eager eyes, not one with an unusual, almost human-like face that made them hesitate. Margaret sat in her office, staring at the list of names in front of her. She had been running the shelter for over a decade, and this was always the worst part of the job. The facility had a strict intake limit, and no matter how hard they tried to push adoptions, there were always more animals coming in than going out. With a heavy sigh, she took out her pen and drew a small checkmark beside Buddy's name. The date was set. If no one came for him by Friday, he would be euthanized first thing in the morning. She closed the file and leaned back in her chair. "I hate this part," she muttered. Out in the kennel, Buddy stretched his legs and trotted to the front of his cage as a woman walked by. She glanced at him, then quickly looked away. He tilted his head. Another rejection. A young volunteer named Katie knelt beside his cage, resting her fingers through the metal bars. "I don't get it, Bud," she whispered. "You're special. Why can't they see that?" Buddy licked her fingers gently, his strange little face unreadable as always. Margaret stepped into the room, her voice hesitant. "Katie, I need to talk to you." The girl turned, her stomach twisting. She already knew what was coming. "No," she said, standing up. "Not Buddy." Margaret's face was full of sympathy, but her voice was firm. "We don't have a choice." Tears burned in Katie's eyes. "He just needs more time." "We don't have more time." Buddy sat silently as the two humans spoke in hushed voices, his eyes shifting between them. He didn't understand their words, but he could sense their sadness. That night, Katie stayed late, slipping into the kennels after hours. She sat outside Buddy's cage, stroking his fur through the bars. I wish I could take you home, she whispered. Buddy let out a soft sigh, curling up into a small ball. Friday was only 2 days away, and no one knew that his time was almost up. Friday morning arrived with a heavy stillness in the air. The shelter, usually filled with the sounds of barking and excited tails thumping against kennel walls, felt different today. Quieter, somber. Dr. Taylor stepped into the building, adjusting her coat as she checked the day's schedule. She was the shelter's visiting veterinarian, called in once a week to handle medical cases, vaccinations, and, on the worst days, euthanasia. She hated that part of the job. It never got easier. Margaret met her at the front desk, her face tired. Free today, she said softly, sliding over a clipboard. Dr. Taylor took it, scanning the names. Her eyes stopped on one. Buddy. She frowned. This one. He's been here a while, hasn't he? Margaret nodded. Too long. Dr. Taylor hesitated, glancing toward the kennels. Any interest at all? Margaret sighed. Not one person willing to take him. Without another word, Dr. Taylor made her way down the hall, her footsteps slow, deliberate. She had done this enough times to know it was better to keep a professional distance, but something about this one felt different. She reached Buddy's cage and crouched down. The little dog was curled up in his usual corner, his big, expressive eyes blinking up at her. He didn't cower, didn't bark. He just watched. Dr. Taylor swallowed hard. Hey, Buddy, she murmured, unlocking the cage. Let's get this over with, okay? As she reached for him, her fingers brushed against something unexpected, something buried deep beneath his tangled fur. She froze. A collar. Her breath caught as she carefully untangled the matted hair around it. No one had noticed it before. Most stray dogs came in without one, and after weeks in the shelter, no one thought to check. Her fingers traced the metal tag, worn and slightly rusted. She wiped off the grime, revealing the engraving beneath. The moment she read the words, her heart stopped. If found, call immediately. Special care required. Her pulse pounded in her ears. What did that mean? Why hadn't anyone seen this before? She stood up abruptly, the clipboard slipping from her hands and clattering to the floor. She barely noticed. Margaret, she called, her voice sharp with urgency. Margaret appeared in the doorway, startled. What's wrong? Dr. Taylor held up the tag. We can't do this. Not yet. Margaret's brows furrowed. Why not? Dr. Taylor's hands shook slightly as she reached for her phone. Because someone out there is looking for her. And she had a feeling, deep in her gut, that this little dog story was far from over. Dr. Taylor's fingers trembled as she dialed the number engraved on the small, rusted tag. The shelter office was silent except for the faint hum of the overhead lights and the rhythmic thumping of Buddy's tail against the floor. He sat patiently beside her chair, watching her with those deep, knowing eyes. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a click. A voice answered. Hello. It was an older man, his voice rough and tired, as if he hadn't slept in days. Dr. Taylor cleared her throat. Yes, hi. I'm calling from the Westbrook Animal Shelter. We. She didn't even finish her sentence. You found him? The man's voice cracked, raw with emotion. Oh God, you have him. Dr. Taylor exchanged a glance with Margaret, who had been listening closely. Yes, sir. A small brown and white dog with a very unique face. His caller says to call this number if found. There was silence on the other end, followed by a shaky breath. Thank you, the man whispered. Please, don't do anything to him. I'm coming right now. Dr. Taylor hesitated. Sir, before you come, can you tell me more about him? We didn't even realize he had a collar until just now. The man exhaled deeply. I don't have time to explain over the phone. Just don't let him out of your sight. He's more important than you realize. Then the call ended. Dr. Taylor lowered the phone slowly. Margaret frowned. Well, that was intense. Dr. Taylor nodded, glancing down at Buddy, who had curled up at her feet. I don't know what's going on, she admitted, but I have the feeling we just avoided a huge mistake. Margaret sighed in relief. I'll cancel the euthanasia order. Katie, the young volunteer who had grown attached to Buddy, had been listening nearby. She stepped forward, her eyes wide. So, he has an owner? Someone actually wants him. Dr. Taylor smiled faintly. Not just someone. If that man's reaction was anything to go by, Buddy isn't just a pet. He's family. For the first time in weeks, hope filled the shelter. Katie knelt beside Buddy, ruffling his fur. See? I told you, Bud. You're special. The little dog let out a soft, content sigh and rested his head on her lap. All that was left to do now was wait. And none of them could have guessed just how important this little dog truly was. The shelter buzzed with quiet anticipation. Dr. Taylor kept glancing at the clock, counting the minutes since the phone call. Margaret had already informed the staff. Buddy was off the euthanasia list. His owner was coming. But who was he? And why had he reacted so emotionally? Katie sat cross-legged on the floor beside Buddy, scratching gently behind his ears. Someone really does love you, she whispered. I knew it. Buddy licked her hand in response, his tail wagging slightly. Then the sound of screeching tires outside broke the stillness. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps echoed against the pavement. Dr. Taylor rushed to the front entrance just as the door burst open. An elderly man stood there, breathless. His graying hair was disheveled, his clothes slightly wrinkled as if he had dressed in a hurry. But what caught Dr. Taylor's attention most was the desperation in his eyes. Where is he? The man asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Dr. Taylor stepped aside and motioned toward the back. Right this way. The man followed, his hands trembling at his sides. As soon as he entered the room, his eyes locked on the little brown and white dog resting on the floor. Buddy. At the sound of his voice, Buddy's ears perked up. His head lifted, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, recognition. The little dog's entire body jolted with excitement. His tail wagged wildly as he scrambled to his feet, nails clicking against the tile. A sound, half whimper, half bark, escaped him as he bolted toward the man. The shelter staff watched in stunned silence as Buddy leaped into the man's arms. The elderly man caught him with ease, holding him close against his chest. His hands shook as he buried his face in the dog's fur. Oh, Buddy, he murmured. I thought I lost you forever. Tears glistened in the man's eyes, but he wasn't ashamed of them. The way he clung to the small dog, like he was something precious, something irreplaceable, told everyone in the room just how much Buddy meant to them. Dr. Taylor felt a lump in her throat. Sir, she said gently, can you tell us what happened? How did he end up here? The man took a deep breath, still cradling Buddy. His voice was thick with emotion as he finally answered. He wasn't lost, he said. He was taken. A heavy silence filled the room. Dr. Taylor's eyes widened. Taken. The man nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. And I think I know why. The room was utterly silent. Every shelter worker and volunteer stood frozen, their eyes locked on the elderly man as he held Buddy tightly in his arms. Dr. Taylor took a cautious step forward. Sir, what do you mean he was taken? The man exhaled shakily and gently set Buddy down. The little dog remained glued to his side, his tail wagging but his eyes alert, as if he too knew the weight of what was about to be said. My name is Henry Lawson, the man began, his voice thick with emotion. Buddy wasn't just a pet. He was being trained for something special, something important. Margaret crossed her arms. Trained for what? Henry's gaze softened as he looked down at Buddy, who was watching him with those strange, almost human-like eyes. My granddaughter, Emily, has a rare neurological condition. It makes it difficult for her to understand facial expressions, emotions, even basic interactions. She struggles to connect with people. Dr. Taylor nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. Henry continued, his voice quieter now. We found out about a special program, one that trained dogs with expressive faces to help children like Emily. Dogs that could almost mimic human emotions. It's rare, but some dogs are born with a gift. Buddy was one of them. Katie gasped softly. That's why he looks so different. Henry smiled faintly. Yes, that little face of his, it's not just unique. It's a bridge. Emily learned to read emotions by watching him. If he looked happy, she understood happiness. If he looked sad, she learned what sadness meant. He was changing her world. A lump formed in Dr. Taylor's throat. But how did he end up here? Henry's expression darkened. 3 months ago, someone broke into my yard and stole him. I searched everywhere. I posted flyers, called every shelter, every vet in the county. Nothing. His hands clenched into fists. Then 2 weeks ago, someone called me from an unlisted number. They told me Buddy was gone, that I'd never see him again. And then they hung up. A chill ran through the room. Margaret frowned. But why would someone steal him? Henry hesitated. I think someone knew how valuable he was. That he wasn't just some ordinary dog. Maybe they wanted to sell him. Maybe they thought they could train him for something else. I don't know. But somehow he must have escaped and ended up here. Dr. Taylor shook her head in disbelief. And she swallowed, unable to finish the sentence. Henry's voice broke. If you hadn't found that collar, if you hadn't called me. Buddy nudged his hand, as if sensing his sorrow. Henry let out a breath and knelt beside him, stroking his fur. Then his voice steadied. I need to take him home. Henry's words hung heavy in the air. I need to take him home. Dr. Taylor nodded instinctively, but Margaret hesitated. Wait, she said carefully. We want Buddy to go home with you, but we still need to follow protocol. We can't just release a dog without proof of ownership. Henry's jaw tensed. You think I'm lying? No, Margaret said gently. But you have to understand. Shelters deal with stolen pet cases all the time. We need some kind of documentation. Do you have vet records? Photos? Anything that proves Buddy is yours? Henry exhaled sharply, frustration evident. I have everything. Photos, medical records, adoption papers from the training program. I even have videos of Buddy and Emily together. They're in my car. Dr. Taylor gave him a reassuring nod. That should be enough. If you can show us those, we can get the paperwork started. Henry didn't wait. He turned and rushed outside, practically running to his car. Meanwhile, Katie knelt beside Buddy, stroking his fur. You're really going home, she whispered. You have a family. Buddy rested his head on her knee, his eyes filled with something almost like gratitude. A minute later, Henry returned, a worn folder in one hand and a phone in the other. He handed the folder to Margaret first. Everything's in here. Medical records, ownership papers, even a report I filed when he was stolen. Margaret flipped through the pages, nodding as she read. This all checks out. Then Henry turned to Dr. Taylor, unlocking his phone. And this, he said, holding it up, is the most important proof of all. A video played on the screen. In it, a little girl, no older than 6, sat on a blanket in a sunlit backyard. Her blonde hair was tied in messy pigtails, and she held a small stuffed animal in her lap. Beside her sat Buddy, his expressive face turned toward her. Buddy, the girl's soft voice said, show me happy. The little dog perked up, tail wagging, ears lifted. His mouth curled slightly, as if mimicking a smile. Emily giggled. Good boy. Then she hesitated. Now, show me sad. Buddy's ears drooped. His head lowered. His big round eyes looked up at her with the saddest expression a dog could make. Emily reached out, gently touching his fur. It's okay, she said softly. You don't have to be sad. The video ended. No one in the room spoke for a long moment. Then Margaret exhaled, closing the folder. That's all we need. Henry's face relaxed in relief. Dr. Taylor smiled. Buddy is officially going home. Buddy sat beside Henry as the shelter staff finished the paperwork. His tail thumped quietly against the floor, but there was an energy in his small body, like he knew this was the moment he had been waiting for. Katie knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears one last time. You're really leaving this time, she murmured. For real. Buddy licked her hand, his warm eyes filled with something unspoken. Gratitude. Affection. A silent goodbye. Margaret handed the final papers to Henry. Everything is set, she said with a smile. Take him home. Henry exhaled, his grip tightening on the leash. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He looked down at Buddy. "Come on, boy. Let's go see Emily." The shelter staff watched as Henry led Buddy out the door. Katie blinked away tears. "He's really gone." Dr. Taylor smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "He's where he belongs." The drive home was quiet, but Buddy sat upright in the passenger seat, his ears twitching at every familiar sound. The trees, the roads, the scent of the air, it was all coming back to him. When Henry finally pulled into the driveway, Buddy's tail wagged uncontrollably. The house in front of him was more than just a place. It was home. Inside, a little girl sat on the living room floor staring blankly at the television. She was small and fragile, her pigtails slightly uneven. "Emily," Henry called softly. She turned slowly, her expression neutral, until she saw him. Until she saw Buddy. For a second, there was stillness, silence, as if her brain couldn't process what her eyes were seeing. Then, "Buddy." She shot up from the floor, her little legs stumbling as she ran toward him. Buddy leaped forward at the same time, the leash slipping from Henry's fingers. The impact was gentle but full of love. Emily wrapped her tiny arms around him, burying her face in his fur. Her shoulders trembled, and small hiccuped sobs escaped her lips. "I thought you were gone," she whispered. "I thought you weren't coming back." Buddy licked her cheek, his strange little face filled with warmth and understanding. Henry wiped his eyes as he watched. He had been so afraid that losing Buddy would set Emily back, that she would retreat into herself again. But now, as he saw her hugging the little dog like he was her whole world, he knew everything was going to be okay. Buddy was home.